Sting was born as Matthew Gordon Sumner on October 2, 1951, in the city of Wallsend, Northumberland, England. He came into the world at Hunter Memorial Hospital, the eldest son of Audrey Colwell and Ernest Sumner. Audrey was a hairdresser, mother of 4, and also played the piano. Ernest was an army engineer and later went on to manage a dairy. He also had a fine tenor voice. Sting and his parents lived on this street in the early 50s. The largest ships in the world were built in those shipyards and then launched into the river to never return. Wallsend is part of an industrial area in northeast England by the River Tyne. The city of Newcastle is just 5 miles to the west and had in the 60s a population of about 350,000. Roughly 2,000 years ago, the Romans built a fort in this area, a bridge across the River Tyne, and Hadrian's Wall, which acted as the northern border of Roman Britannia. Here is Sting visiting the place where his first house used to stand. The block was demolished and ancient Roman ruins were found underneath. This is referenced in Sting's song, All This Time. In 1956, when Sting was 5 years old, the family moved to 84 Station Road, not far from his previous home. His father took over management of an ice cream shop there, with a dairy yard in the back and a diesel truck for milk delivery. The family, now including 2 sons and a sister on the way, would live above the shop on the 2nd floor. Here in the back of the house is where Sting and his father loaded up the bottles on the milk truck for delivery early in the morning, 7 days a week. Sting's brother Philip recalls how they used to play football on the back street. Sting went to St. Columba Infant School on Carville Road and later attended St. Columba Primary School on Headley Street. The building has long been demolished. In 1962, at age 11, Sting passes the entrance exam and wins a scholarship to a fairly exclusive high school, St. Cuthbert's Grammar School in Newcastle. Sting's first instrument was his mom's piano, and later on, he inherited his uncle's acoustic guitar. At age 13 he was able to save up and finally buy his own instrument. His brother Philip still has the guitar in his possession, and here, Sting's close friend Simon shows it to us. The imagery, traditions and history of Newcastle and Wallsend would permeate a lot of Sting's music, but in particular appeared heavily on the 1991 album The Soul Cages and 2013's The Last Ship, which also took the form of a Broadway musical. Songs like Island of Souls, Why Should I Cry For You, The Wild Wild Sea, The Soul Cages, The Last Ship, August Winds, Dead Man's Boots, just to name a few, have to do with this landscape, its history, and symbolism.
The 1991 song, Island of Souls, seems almost autobiographical. It's about a child who grows up in the shadow of a shipyard and whose father is a shipbuilder. The child dreams of avoiding what seems like a bleak future by escaping to the Island of Souls. The song, Language of Birds, written 22 years later, refers back to the same story of the Island of Souls, the folktale of the soul cages, and that of the underground river that leads to this fabled island.
In 1966, Sting's family moves to 52 Thirlmere Avenue in North Shields, a more affluent area about 5 miles away from their previous home. Here Sting would remain until his early 20s when he moved out to share a flat with his friends in Heaton.
In 1967, Sting was able to sneak into a Jimi Hendrix show, despite being underage at the time. The show was at the Club A Go-Go on Percy Street in Newcastle. In his own words, his worldview would be significantly altered after seeing Hendrix play that night. After completing high school, Sting would drift from one dead-end job to another, until finally deciding in 1971 to study at Northern Counties Teachers Training College. This allowed buying some time while pursuing his musical interests. During college, he would participate in various bands playing bass. the Newcastle Big Band, the Phoenix Jazz Men, and more successfully in the band Last Exit, with fellow student Jerry Richardson on piano. Last Exit would play a kind of jazz fusion with Sting on vocals and bass. After finishing his training as a teacher, Sting lands a teaching job at St. Paul's School, where his sister Anita had studied. In 1975, Sting meets actress Frances Tomelty while playing in the backing band for one of her plays. In 1976 they get married. After quitting his teaching job, Sting and Last Exit are hired to play on cruise ship SS Oriana for the summer. They sail all the way to the Greek Isles and return by the end of the summer. And later that year, their son Joe Sumner is born.
Before the end of 1976, Last Exit play a show at a college in Newcastle, and by chance alone, Stuart Copeland, then drummer of Curved Air, is in the audience. Stuart is impressed by Sting's bass playing, and when the show is over, tells him to call him up if he's ever in London. Early in 1977, Sting, wife, and baby make the move to London. Neither of them have jobs but are able to borrow a small apartment in Battersea.
In London, Stuart Copeland and Sting hit it off, and soon after, The Police was born, with Henry Padavani on guitar. Sting and his wife were able to finally rent their own place, a basement flat on Leinster Square in Bayswater.
In mid-1977, through a project called Strontium 90, Sting and Stuart hook up with experienced guitarist Andy Summers, and soon after, Andy takes Henry Padavani's place in The Police. The Police are a huge success. In 1982, Frances has a daughter with Sting, named Kate. Soon after, however, they would separate, and Sting would start a relationship with his next-door neighbor, actress Trudy Styler.
Trudy and Sting have been together ever since. Here in 1991 they revisited Newcastle during the release of The Soul Cages. They would have 4 more children, in 1984, their daughter Bridget, in 1985 their son Jake, as documented in the film Bring on the Night. In the mid-80s, Sting lived mostly in New York, in this apartment at 468 West Broadway. Here he wrote many of the songs that appeared on 1987's Nothing Like the Sun.
The Nothing Like the Sun tour was one of his most ambitious. 19 countries, 168 shows, over a year on the road, and 9 musicians on stage.
In 1990, Sting purchased a country house called Lake House, in Wiltshire, dating from 1578.
Sting and Trudy would have 2 more children. Elia Coco in 1990 and Giacomo in 1995. In 1992, the couple had a formal wedding ceremony with 250 guests at Lake House, after which there was a brief Police reunion show.
In this house he would record his 1993 album, 10 Summoner's Tales, and the 1996 album, Mercury Falling.
Sting and Trudy had been spending their summers in Tuscany since 1990, renting Villa Salviati, but in 1997 they bought their own 17th-century villa, Il Palagio. Here Sting would record material for many albums, including 1999's Brand New Day.